conservation side in the beginning. So I've got two parts to that question. John?
I think, particularly in the Victorian example, we've got to look to see why the marine parks, or what the fundamentals were of the marine parks, why they were set up. And here in Victoria, they were set up to conserve habitats and biodiversity, reduce threatening processes such as invasive species. So, from a fisheries perspective, there's not much to say, as in they weren't set up to enhance fisheries or to make more fish or anything like that. So those sort of questions are off the board, and they're the kind of questions you often get answered. Oh, are there more fish? Are we producing more fish? But I was going to say, in Australia in general, that's not the reason why marine parks are set up. They're set up for conservation and biodiversity reasons. There's been a little bit of research in marine parks here in Victoria, but probably not to the extent to give a decent answer. And there's been there's been a little bit of press around that in the last year or two in terms of the resources that have actually been put into monitoring these parks have not been adequate to provide to tell you whether the biodiversity has been conserved or not. So yeah, unfortunately for the students, look, things are looking okay. I mean, we haven't had any sort of major declines, and they've done an alright job. But it all, of course, depends on what you're monitoring and what your question is there. But yeah, in terms of fishing, getting back to seafood, there are many direct benefits to say fisheries sustainability in that case.
Hello? Yeah. Okay. My question is then, why do recreational fishers want to go back into those systems if the fishing stocks are not improving?
Well, just a very quick one on your first point, that the resources that you're looking for with the students. The Victorian Auditor General did a study into the marine parks and found that there wasn't the level of monitoring required to really make a sound judgment. The Victorian Environmental Assessment Council currently has an investigation going on as well. From my personal point of view, it's marine parks are why I live where I do in Point Cook, with the Point Cook Marine Sanctuary. I'd personally be, I don't want to see it opened up necessarily to recreational fishing. Two reasons. I think at last count it was about, now I stand corrected, 5.3% of the state's marine parks areas are currently protected. That leaves a hell of a lot that isn't. The other thing too is that the marine sanctuaries and parks, that makes the assumption that recreational fishing doesn't take place in them. And from my personal experience, that's a valid assumption. There is fishing going on illegally in a lot of these parks from time to time, unfortunately.
What about Will, who wants to quickly add something?
I just quickly talk about the recreational fishing side of things. Just wanted to make clear that a lot of recreational fishers come from a lot of different, the whole society. I'm a recreational fisher, I'm sure there's recreational fishers here. A lot of the agendas you see get pushed politically does not necessarily represent the majority of fishers or recreational fishers. And you've got to keep that in mind. A lot of these sort of lobby groups and sort of up at the top have specific agendas that, just...
Thank you. Will?
So marine parks, big issue and big one, and very different between Victorian and New South Wales approach to marine parks. In Victoria, you went for the full, proper national park approach of sanctuary zones, whereas in New South Wales, much more multi-use, great big area designated with very small sanctuary zones. So University of Tasmania, Edgar, did a big survey that came out fairly recently of marine parks globally, and they found that some were performing really, really well, most weren't, in terms of your criteria. So were the fish in those marine parks getting bigger? Was there on average, compared to outside, was there higher species diversity, etc.? How could you say, well, yes, it's working. Yeah, it was worth the effort. So the ones that they did find that were working were isolated, they were well policed, they were large, they were sanctuary zone only. They weren't a patchwork of, my God, can I do this here, can I do that there? If I'm wearing blue socks on a Friday, I can, this kind of business. It's really, really hard. People need simplicity. So those marine parks were working. So I think that's the key thing. I mean, 10 years is nothing. It's just such a short amount of time. You can't really tell anything in 10 years. But that's a key issue, I think, is that they've done, that big survey has just been done. We now know what works in marine parks and what doesn't. And so, if we are going to be science-led, so I think that the key thing is we now know what works in terms of marine parks. As unpalatable politically as that is to various political parties with the large pressure groups like recreational fishers, I think it's a political issue. It's a bit like climate change, which is a massive thing that's going to be impacting on fisheries. As another recent bit of science that came out has shown, it's not the science that's difficult. We know what works. It's have we got the political will to actually stand up and say, yes, that's important. We need to protect more than 5% or 10% or whatever it is. This is insurance. Really, really simple analogy is, you're not going to go out and get into your car and drive without insurance. But we're doing this with our food security. I mean, it's a very great, Brad's point of taking the sea off seafood is incredibly big point. I mean, when I was running the International Year of the Reef, the biggest thing that was impacting the barrier reef, and still is that we cleared the vast majority of Queensland to grow cattle. Hello! So all of that removal of vegetation in Queensland to grow these cattle that aren't even vaguely from this part of the world, because people like beef. And this is even a bigger issue, much bigger than whether seafood or whatever else. It's a huge issue. So I think we know what's works, and we know what works in a lot of things, but we're not actually implementing it. And I think that's where we need the political will. And that means that people have got to be engaged. People who turn up to events like this, we've actually got to go, yes, sign that damn petition, write to that MP, show them that you're actually not a voiceless person, because otherwise, guess what? The people who are better organised will be organised and you'll lose the marine parks. They'll go.